The propaganda that's going on in this war is insane. I'll say something. I'll say one thing. Like, at least with the US, with NATO countries, there's a little bit of integrity, right? At least, even though it's manipulation, an untrained eye won't see it. It's not obvious, right? Because I've been working in media, Jesus, for 17 years. It's like, to me, it's like, this is ridiculous. Are you guys serious? This is so manipulative. It's like brainwashing, but there's integrity because at the very least, they show you the sources. They let you, give you the opportunity to go and check and verify yourself. And that's where, at the very least, there is integrity, right? But when it comes to Russia, it's just straight up lies. It's just straight up. They don't even try. They're just like, this is what is happening, and if you dare question it, you're going to jail. Like the producer that went on Russian state television with a sign and literally was going to risk her life, but they only gave her a fine, which is kind of crazy because, like, I wonder why they only gave her a fine, because they're putting people in jail for protesting for like 20 years or something ridiculous. They're putting children in jail. So it's interesting to me that a reporter that is this, exposing this war only gets a fine. And I know it's a few $100s, but a few $100s in Russia today is not what it was 4 weeks ago. So that's a lot of money probably for her. But let's not focus too much on Russia, because I don't really have anything to say other than it's just straight up lies, straight up manipulation. There's nowhere to sort of argue with that. It's just kind of like, it's a lie, and that's just a fact. Putin's just lying.
Eleni, you heard there he's celebrating the annexation of Crimea, likening that now to this special military operation, as he's described it, in Ukraine. As he said, trying to rid the Donbass region of what he's described as Nazism, fascism, of genocide. Now, of course, this is completely false. This has been proven, this has been verified not only by CNN and other outlets, but also by NATO and other human rights organizations.
But let's talk about the West, the manipulation in the West. I want to talk about the propaganda in the West and the manipulation, because at least, like, it's an interesting thing to look at. It's an interesting video. With Russia, it's just like, you're straight up lying. That's it. But with the West, it's like, this is a little bit juicy, because this is manipulation, and you really have to read between the lines for you to understand what is really happening. So that's what I'm going to help you do, guys. I'm going to help you read between the lines, right? When it comes to the West, it's the devil is in the details. You really just have to read between the lines, question everything, and ask yourself, why are they saying this, and what do they stand to gain from saying this, right? Why is this reporter saying, first of all, who is saying it? Why are they saying this? And what do they stand to gain from saying all of this? That's the main questions that you should be asking yourself every time that you're watching the news, because the misinformation is happening in the West too. And let me explain this, right? There's this narrative going on right now that Russia is losing this war. Very interesting narrative that Russia is losing the war. The morale is low amongst the Russian troops. They're abandoning, their tankers. 7,000 of them are dead. There's this interesting narrative. But let's read between the lines, because it's very clear that Putin is not giving up until he gets what he wants. So this idea that they're losing the war doesn't make any sense, because ultimately, as long as Putin is able to continue to fund this war, which he is, he might not be able to fund it for 10 years, but he can fund it until he wins, right? So, and in his eyes, he hasn't won until he's taken over Ukraine. So as long as Putin can continue to fund this war, he hasn't lost. He's not going to lose. So all these metrics that they're using, it's just propaganda to make the whole world believe that Russia is losing, and also to infect the Russian people and to make them turn against their president. It's great. It's like I say this time and time again, propaganda is an invisible warfare weapon, and the US dominates that globally. The US perspective dominates the world's perspective. And because of this, the US is winning this war with this weapon. So the question is, are you going to allow this weapon manipulate you and make you believe it? And this is a question for Russian people too. If they can see this, because I don't think they have access to be able to watch this. But ask yourselves, this propaganda that the US is spewing, it's a warfare tactic. Let's like talk about this narrative that Russia is losing. And I want to give some examples that I found quite interesting. And I'm going to take specific things that some reporters said on the news and see how they twisted that information to position it as though Russia is losing this war. So the first one is this clip of this reporter.
Most famously, the Soviet tanks rolled into Afghanistan in 1979 and ended up bogged down there for a decade. The war was a disaster for Afghanistan, where something like 2 million Afghan civilians were killed, but it was a debacle for the Soviet military. They lost nearly 15,000 Soviet troops over 10 years and ultimately had to give up and retreat. The Soviet Union itself collapsed just 2 years later, in part because of the unpopularity and cost of that war. And so here is something worth considering. If Afghanistan was a military catastrophe, a humiliating defeat that contributed to the fall of a global superpower, 15,000 soldiers killed over a decade, what would we call an invasion in which Russia has lost half that number in just 3 weeks? Because that is what American intelligence officials say has happened, according to new reporting by the New York Times.
How is the amount of soldiers that have died an indicator of winning or losing a war? I mean, I get it in traditional times, yes. But what is the Russian population? I think it's about 150 million people. Let's say half of them could fight this war if Putin makes them, because this is an authoritarian government, right? So I don't think, and Putin is said to have, I can't remember how many troops, but he's got a lot of troops. 7,000 troops is not that many troops compared to his military and compared to the Russian people that he can force to go and fight this war. I guess technically because the media is making it seem as though all of Russia is against Putin in this war. I do not believe that all of Russia is against him. I mean, did you see the rally that he just held today and all those people that came out to support him? So you can't tell me that all those people there are not in support of this war. What are they doing there? Even though CNN did say that some of the Russian officials were forced to go to the rally.
Now we are hearing reports that members of staff from the Kremlin, other state officials were actually pressured to attend this rally. They were bussed in. CNN hasn't been able to independently verify these reports.
What's your source? And to me, it's like anything they can find to throw darts, anything they can find to weaken the Russian position, they will use it. And for me, here's why I don't stand with this. As much as I do not support Russia and I don't take sides, I also don't like being manipulated. Just tell me the truth. At least when I watch Sky News, I get the truth. I get the truth. I don't get some sort of version of some manipulation. I get the truth, and at the very least, they're going to give me their opinion. They're not just going to throw these little darts, invisible darts that you can't see, and try and brainwash me into believing whatever it is. Right? And at least like when it comes to the British media, they're very subtle with when they throw shade, right? Like, for example, they call President Putin Mr. Putin instead of president. Those subtle little things still shows that they're a little bit biased, but that's how they throw darts. They're just going to give you the information as it is. But when it comes to the US, it's all about manipulation and trying to shape your perspective. And I'm like, guys, I don't like being manipulated. I'm not on the side of Russia. And now you're making it difficult for me to support NATO when all you're doing is trying to manipulate me into doing so. So I do not believe 7,000 troops is an indicator that they've lost this war when Putin can just force the Russian people to go and fight the war for him, So that's one thing. And how would he force them? I mean, he'd say, look, you're going to fight this war. If you pull out, I'm going to kill your family. This is Putin. I'm just telling you, because some people are like, wait, he can't force people to do that. He can't force people to do whatever. And yes, he can. He can be like, I'm going to kill your family. If you don't fight this war, this is your daughter. This is your wife. This is your mother. I will shoot them. I would not put it past him. So yes, he can get more troops, right? So 7,000 troops lost is not an indicator of a lost war. I think there's so much more that goes into it. So, I think you'd have to sit down with an expert, a military expert, to explain to us the specifics of why Putin is losing this war, not, oh, morale is low. And I know that low morale is not a good thing for troops, but who is saying that the morale is low?
This is important timing for Russia. We have heard reports from NATO and other Western officials that morale within the Russian military and even support from within Russia is waning.
Today, a British military intelligence assessment echoed what American defense officials have been saying, that the Russian invasion of Ukraine has largely stalled on all fronts.
Whenever they cite their sources, it's always NATO, the US, and Western officials. That's the opposition. What does the opposition know? Like, they're always citing the source as the opposition. Obviously, the opposition's perspective is biased. Give me a neutral, entity that has looked into this and now says, oh, well, morale is low. But don't tell me the opposition is saying morale is low. That's like playing soccer and your opponents are like, yo, their morale is low. Of course they're going to say that. So, these sources are ridiculous. But it's so easy because they'll say our sources